bond market?
Well, thank you very much, Senna. I think when I saw that, I knew that this is in negotiations, you basically talk about posturing. If you are looking for 1 cedi, when you go to negotiate, you don't ask for 1 cedi, because there's also a rule of negotiation. The other party always says never give what a person requests. Give them at least 50 to 80% of what they request. So if you request 1 cedi, you will probably get 80 pesos or 50 pesos. But if you go and request 2 cedi, the person says, after 2 cedi I don't have, you can take 1 cedi and go. In my personal view, that is the kind of negotiations that Oforiatta is engaging in. Because let's be honest, if you are an investor, I think what we need to first paint is, when they say, when these kind of transactions happen, it's always important for us to always understand the other side as well. The other side are not just Shakespearean Shylock type money lenders just sitting down there trying to make other countries' lives hell. No. The other side are either sovereign investors, that is countries that have invested in your debt, or corporate investors. And what these corporate investors, where do they get their money from? They get their money from individuals who choose to invest in them. So, for example, if you went to a data bank and bought any of their funds, be it M fund or whatever fund, and they promise to pay you interest, they collect that money and they in turn go to buy a government bond that will pay interest higher than what they will pay you. So think about it. If government decides to go and negotiate with data bank and say, we owe you 2 billion, we want 40% of that to be taken out, it means 800 million will be disappear, and you only have 1.2 billion left. And on top of that, you lose 5% of your interest. Now, data bank has to now think, when I collected the money from Senna and the crew, I negotiated that I will pay them interest of 10% plus their full money back. Now, the one owing me saying they can't give me the full money, I will lose 40% of it, and on top of that, I won't get 5% interest. That is going to take a serious hit on their business model. So when you look at it from that angle, you will try and humanize the other side. But I think that what Oforiatta has done and has put out is basically pie in the sky thinking. And it's a little bit even more naughty or mischief for him to put it out in public when he hasn't even entered the room to discuss with them. You go and stand in the media and say, we're looking for them to accept a 40% haircut. That is 40% haircut on the investments into Ghana government debt by pension houses in the UK, US, around the globe, by various investors, and various banks, of course. And I'm not sure that many of them will take it in good standing. Of course, if they accept it, it gives Ghana some briefing space. Although we will always hesitate to ask briefing space to do what? Because if we are going to do what we've been doing the last 6-7 years, then we are not going to move anywhere. Because in the last 6-7 years, all we have done is borrow and spend. We haven't laid any investment that will bring back money to help us pay those debts. And that is one of the main reasons we are where we are. If you look at what the IMF tells us, the revenue base is shrinking and the debt is high. So we have not invested any of the money. As Professor Gachi said, there's not a single major project that you can say this has gone into that will help us save some money or raise some money to regenerate the economy for us to pay. And so my thoughts on that is that, look, we will get some deal like Zambia did. Fortunately, you know the story of Sri Lanka. They went down that route, they got nothing. They were thrown out. Zambia went down that route, and what Zambia got is nowhere near what we are asking for. So I think that what he has put out there is just raising the hopes of Ghanaians. Although I'm not sure if there are still any hopes. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think we will achieve that 40% cut on principal, or if you like, the 5%. What we may get is similar to what Zambia got. And this is quite telling. Zambia was more serious than we are. Zambia engaged in very aggressive fiscal consolidation. In other words, they engaged in very aggressive cutting of budget items that were not contributory to the growth of the economy. Mentioned the budget items. All these new start programs that is just an avenue to share money to MPP apparatus. They cut down on that. And I think that our government has to be serious and follow say. Now, what did Gambia get, my brother? Gambia got a 20-year deal. That deal basically meant that their debt is restructured to be repaid over 20 years. No part of it was cut out. No haircut. What they got on top of that was a 3-year stay of execution or a 3-year grace period where they won't pay back any portion of their debt. So if you owe 10 billion and you're supposed to be paying 1 billion every year on top of interest, they were told, don't pay us the principal for the next 3 years. So keep that money and you can use it to pay interest. So over the next 3 years, they are only paying interest. They are not paying any what do you call it? They are not paying any portion of the principal. So they have a 3-year grace period to get their mojo back. And that was the basis on which the IMF was able to continue with their $1.4 billion debt exchange, extended credit facility, similar to our 3 billion. And you know what Zambia did the very next day after that? A few weeks after they had this restructuring done under the common framework of the G20, which includes the European countries and China, they went and looked into their loan book and realized that they had as much as $2 billion in loans that have not yet been disbursed. In other words, loans they have agreed with other countries, which is part of their debt, but they haven't yet disbursed them. They haven't yet received the money. And they canceled those loans. So by canceling those extra $2 billion, they have given themselves more headroom. The question is Ghana going to follow Zambia as it is? Are we going to start looking at our debt and cancel any debt that hasn't been disbursed yet? Any debt we have contracted for projects that we know are not coming off, are we going to cancel them? Any useless projects, are we going to stall them and stop them so that at least we can reconsolidate? So I think if you look at it in the light of this, I have very, very, very serious concerns on our ability to secure a 40% haircut and a 5% cancellation on our interest or coupons on our Eurobonds.
So, as far as you're concerned, from the Zambian experience, the worst we'll get is a deferment.
Most likely. Perhaps the only thing that might do our favor is our president likes to sucker to Westerners, as you know. And in fact, this particular IMF deal, we were not qualified for it. But because he sucks up to the Americans and others so badly and gives them anything and everything they want at the expense of our national sovereignty, sometimes the Americans would whisper into the ears of the IMF to breach economic sense and try and go on. But I don't expect us to get something significantly different from what Zambia has already obtained. Because the reality of the case is that for these countries who have invested in us, if say China has invested, in the case of Zambia, China alone was their largest Eurobond debtor to the tune of 4.1 billion. So if you were to go and tell China that you need to cancel 40% of that 4.1 billion you owe us, that is a lot of money for them to take. We are pushing for somewhere 1.5 to 2 billion that they have to cancel. That means that individual investors in China who put their money into those banks, like Jiangxi Bank or China Exim Bank, which invested in our Eurobonds, will lose their money. Now, you and I know what has happened to our domestic debt exchange program. When banks lost their money and they passed it to customers, customer savings were what? Destroyed overnight. That is having a telling impact on our economy as we speak now. So I do not expect, under all circumstances, that these countries will go into these kind of steep haircuts. No more than 10%, a few percentage points here and there, debt deferrals, we will definitely expect that. And I think for me, a debt deferral is reasonable. Because if you say, look, I can't pay now, I'm giving you more room to get your act together to pay. It instills some discipline in us so that we will realize that we will not always go and borrow and waste the money and expect that they will cancel it. The last time we had HEPIC, we had a clean slate. What did we do with that? In less than 20 years, we were broke. You do not help your child by constantly doing these kind of things. So, it is not condescending for Westerners to refuse to do that or Chinese to refuse to do that. We got ourselves into this mess. What we expect is to take the Zambian example. Start cancelling projects that are not necessary. It's not like we have any projects anyway. Start reining in on debt. Stop the profligacy. We should by now be taking our budget line by line and taking out items, and we can save a lot of money. But we don't do ourselves any favor when we take people like the Bank of Ghana governor on the road shows when he's part of the problem to go and tell people to cancel debts when he just blew $6 billion of our money. So I think Oforiatta has to get a bit more serious. Only a press conference announcing this 40% is not going to go anywhere. I mean, think about the pain that he went through in Ghana. With the local bond holders, he tried to restructure. And even with that, he barely got 65% of his target. Now think about the foreign ones, he has no control. And he cannot play that kind of Takeshi he played with the local Ghanaian bondholders, with the foreign bondholders. Because in fact, most of the foreign bondholders have already cashed in on their debt swaps. They've cashed in on their insurance. Because anytime they buy government of Ghana debts, like many other developing country debts, they take insurance on it. And the insurance says when the person is unable to pay, the insurance will pay us. As far back as February, when we stopped paying, some of them already cashed in on it. And that explains why our bonds are now being traded as a steep discount. They are basically junk now being held by effectively mostly vulture funds and those who will hold your debt because it has a high interest and they seek to collect it at whatever cost. Now, if they refuse and you decide you can't pay, they reserve the right to go and take in off your assets abroad and so on and so forth. But it's early days. I suspect this is just Brinksmanship. He's just putting this out there, hoping that he'll get something in between what he wants and zero. But I'm not confident that we're going to get this deal he has announced. This deal he's announced this proposal he's announced is too good to be true. He hasn't even gone into the room to offer this, and he's announcing it to us. I'm not confident we will get it.
And if his Brinksmanship will fail, you mentioned the IMF. I know the IMF can pretend that we've satisfied the conditions and continue to give us their money. But who can they lean on to accept this deal? You said China might refuse, but can they get the Europeans, the European country we owe, and do they have an impact on the commercial debt holders?
So IMF as an institution, as we know, is owned by many countries, including ourselves, and there are rules that they play by. They can only lend when you are in certain positions. And this is why they are saying to Ghana, if you want to get into a particular position, you need to take a certain shaving or haircut or restructuring certain debts so that you come to a sustainable debt level for us to be able to lend. Because their main rule is they can't lend to you when you are bankrupt. So if you are unable to pay, they won't be able to lend to you. And that's why you realize that earlier in the year, they forced us effectively to restructure certain debts to get the Bank of Ghana to lose as much as $6 billion so that we will appear to be lean, we will appear to be capable, and then they can then give us that money, which is ironic because I'm basically telling somebody who lent you money to cancel the money they lent you so that you are in a position where I can lend you more money. You know, it's very ironic. It's the same thing with Zambia. Zambia's $1.4 billion extended credit facility was held up until the G20 under the common framework was able to agree this. Because that G20 is made of the Western countries and the Chinese. And the IMF could do nothing but just encourage and plead with those countries to try and accept it. In the end, as I said, they didn't get a haircut. What they basically got was an extension or a reprieve for a while to be able to get their mojo back. And that then allowed the IMF to disburse the next tranche. In our case, earlier in the year, we were not qualified for that $600 million. But of course, the Americans intervened and the IMF helped us by helping us cheat on our homework. You know, cancel our own debt that we owe to ourselves. You know, we basically canceled $6 billion. We lost $6 billion so that we could get $600 million, which is ironic, just 10% of that. Now, IMF is helping us again because we were due to get the second tranche in October. Today is 10th of October. We are not in a position to. Now we've moved it into November. And it's conditioned on China and the other G20 countries accepting the kind of deal or coming to a certain deal with us. If we don't go in there with realistic negotiation prospects, we may miss November again. And the more we miss this, now if you notice inflation has been cooling a bit because of that injection that came in. You know, so we definitely need to agree a deal with these people so that we can get some briefing space. You know, in the briefing space, if we agree this deal that Oforiatta is even talking about, 30 to 40% cut, our interest payments will come down to about $460 million, which is roughly about 5.4 billion Ghana cedis interest only, not the capital. That is if we even agree this deal. So you can imagine that at present, we are probably paying something close to almost $10 billion every year, which is not where we want to, if not more, in interest only. So we need to be serious in this, and Oforiatta has to stop the brinkmanship and go there, do his mea culpa. He has to be penitent, because we know how we got into this mess. He got us in here. And a lot of the things the IMF is telling us to do is basically reversing some of the very basic things that we messed up with. You talk about, what are they talking about? Some of the reforms, very simple. That Bank of Ghana should not lend to us like the way they lend to us anymore. That Bank of Ghana should increase the interest rates to make sure we contain inflation. They artificially tried to suppress interest rates. It did not work. They lent as much as 6 billion, which we lost to the government of Ghana through the back door. These are the basic common things that we stopped doing, which the IMF is telling us to start doing. Of course, they're also asking us to cut on certain social programs like the free not free school meals, but free education and a few others. But the important thing is that IMF is determined to stick with us and work with us to get these bilateral Eurobond holders to cancel. We need to get serious. IMF can do it for us. They can help us. They can whisper to the people on the back, through the back channels. But Oforiatta has to realize that it's one thing for somebody to lead you to church. It's a different thing for you to do your confession and get your absolution.
So, as to speak, as far as you're concerned, we haven't started anything yet.
No, it's, when you do boxing, before the boxing, you see the combatants will come out and then they'll be doing their practice and then punching the air. And that's what we are doing. We haven't even got into the ring yet. So all that is splashed across the newspapers in Ghana is basically the shadow boxing that we're engaging in yet. Our opponent, the G20 common framework with debt holders, the Paris Club, China, and the like, they are waiting in the boxing ring, waiting for us. We are just coming out of our dressing room, still punching the air, and still wearing our kit, and already announcing results that it is 40% haircut and 5% on interest. We haven't got into the ring yet, so it's too early for us to celebrate. Of course, as patriotic Ghanaians, we all want something that would help us turn the fortunes of Ghana around so that we can address the serious pains that Ghanaians are going through. But we shouldn't be kidding ourselves. It's this kind of propaganda that has landed us where we are. I shall protect the public purse when we are looting the public purse. The economy is on track when the economy is completely in the gutters. We are turning the corner when the corner is still 1 mile away. That kind of signaling, that kind of propaganda that you have the daily guides and co splurging across the newspapers to make Ghanaians feel good when nothing is happening. Somebody is sitting in pain, they need paracetamol. You are announcing to them that the paracetamol is on your table when you are yet to go to the pharmacy and get it. They need to get serious and stop playing propaganda and start actually doing proper finance. Get into the boxing ring, negotiate with them, get a deal, and announce the deal. That is how you do things. It's always that I would prefer for you to come and tell me my food is ready than to tell me that you are about to start preparing my food and start whetting my appetite. 1 hour later, I'm still sitting there and only water is boiling. So I think that they need to get serious. But from where we stand now, he's only making announcements. What we are seeing here are announcements or declaration of intents. But that is dependent on the other party agreeing to whatever you are proposing. I do not think we will get a 40% haircut.
And the question you ask is breathing space to do what? We got some with the DDP. We're hoping to get some with the foreign investors. When you say breathing space to do what do you mean?
What I mean is, what is the strategic? What is the long term? What does this mean for Ghanaians? Ghanaians are going through a lot of pain. What we are expecting is that there will be some investment that unlocks jobs, puts money back into the economy, and allows people to earn a decent wage. Right? Because anytime you engage in a massive infrastructure program, you create jobs. If you start building schools and building hospitals across the length and breadth of the country, Plumbers will get work, carpenters will get work, foremen will get work. Those selling cement will be able to sell more cement, which means Gassen and Jata Cement will produce more, which means that those cement producers will employ more. And you can see how it will increase it will ginger up the economy. Because as you produce more, for every dollar you invest, the multiplier effect, you're able to get 10 times the impact in the economy. That is the kind of conversation we want. So what we should be told, the message of hope should be, we are working hard to get these savings so that we can invest into these aspects of the economy to grow the economy. That message is not being sold. And so you and I, we are a bit indifferent to this whole thing because what are they going to use it for? We don't know. We just went through a domestic debt exchange program for almost a year now. It was announced last October. So technically almost a year. They took some, said they had hit their target, came back and said they want the pension houses and labor unions to go for another round, which I know they are legitimately refusing. Question is, everything we have done so far, where has it gotten us to? All the savings we've made from the domestic debt exchange program, what tangible benefit did Ghanaians get from it apart from the pain we visited on us? Was it just to say it will reduce the amount of inflation? As we speak now, inflation hasn't come down drastically. It's still hovering around, it's come down to about 38% as of last month. But you and I know that we are now going into a high inflationary period because the Christmas period is when a lot of consumption comes in and a lot of importation of goods comes in. And inflation is risking going right back up by early January. It will go right back about the 40% mark. So the message of hope has to be telling us that when we go through the debt restructuring, we're going to save ourselves this much billions. And we're going to take that much billion and invest in schools, in hospitals, in roads, in the infrastructure that is needed. We're going to invest it in clearing NHSI debts, in paying contractors, and all that kind of stuff. That message we are not being told. What we see now is that the profligacy is so much that the 600 million we got, where did it go? We don't know. The domestic debt, the 600 million from the IMF package, the first one, it went straight into paying interest on debts. Is that saying that we don't even have the money to pay the interest? So we are in a big problem. We need to work our way out of this.